right. So I was having trouble with the OBS software on my computer. For whatever reason, it just was not downloading properly. So I am making a movie using Zoom. Without further ado, I would like to talk about my project Car Racing and how it's changed over time by Tim Chavez. So, ever since the invention of the car, two people want to see who could drive faster. Now, that was car racing, but the first organized uh, motorized car, or I should say vehicle contest was on Thanksgiving Day in 1985. And it was a 57-mile race from Chicago to Evanston, Illinois, and back. Now, this consisted of 4 cars and 2 motorcycles, and the winner was Frank Duria. One interesting mention about this race is that only one car was different. 3 cars were what they were called Benz Auto Wagons, and Frank Duria was the only one that did not drive a Mercedes Benz. From 1903 to 1914, there was a 1-mile dirt track in the shape of an oval uh, just south of Pittsburgh, and Louis Chevrolet won the first AAA champion in 1905. Now, during the 20s, there was an economic growth as well as new freedom, and the car was a staple of this time, serving as a way to change social norms. The winner of the 1920 Indy 500 was Gaston Chevrolet, and he was averaging 88 miles per hour. Now, the cars also just decided to change shape, as we'll look here in this YouTube video. After this ad, of course. So as you can see here, they're just normal cars driving around, and most of them were only going about 55 miles an hour. Now, if you notice that there's 2 people in the cars, and one of them is a car mechanic. At that time, the car mechanic was allowed to drive with or ride with the driver, since these cars were really unreliable. Now, as we move on to World War II, we saw a huge decline in car manufacturing, and most of the car materials were turned in for the war effort. Now, in the 1930s, however, high-priced road cars were really turned into car racing. So car companies like Alfa Romeo, Auto Union, Bugatti, and Mercedes-Benz constructed streamlined vehicles with big engines to produce up to 603 horsepower, and were aided by multi-stage supercharging, so compressing air to make it more powerful. And from the 1928 and 30 again, and in 1934 to 36, there was a maximum weight allowed for the cars. And this again was for the war effort. And as we can see in this video, the cars have changed a little bit. Hopefully there's no ad. The cars have changed significantly from the 1920s, so moving a lot faster. Um, but safety was an afterthought in these cars. Maybe. So So as we can see, these cars had a tendency to overheat if they're just sitting. So that's why we get these running starts. Now, in the post-war and as well as Cold War era, sports car emerged as a distinct form of racing, and they had many different uh, classic races. NASCAR was a strictly stock division, and it was renamed the Grand National. And it started in the 1949, with 1950 being the first season. Over a period more than a decade, modifications of both safety and performance were allowed. As we can see, major crashes occurred and multiple people died. We don't have these safety barriers we see nowadays, as well as the fabulous Hudson Hornet right here, one of the more famous racers of the 1950s. During the 60s and 70s, on both sides of the Atlantic, European chassis, as well as large American engines, such as the Lotus 19s, were fitted, and the larger engines like the AC Cobra. A combination of the British chassis and the American V8 engines gave rise to the Can-Am or Canadian American series in the 1960s and 70s. And 1972 is considered NASCAR's modern era. As we see here, these Plymouth Firebirds right here, Superbirds, were very iconic with the high wings. And this is one of the AC Cobras that were very popular at the time. Now, during the 80s and all the way up to the 21st century, as we know it, there was a new technology as well as health craze going on in the scene of professional car racing, and this put emphasis on new fuel technologies as well as efficiency was developed. So a lot of the cars before time had leaded gasoline, and during this time we saw a shift from leaded gasoline to ethanol or biofuels. Um, we also saw the emergence of lucrative TV and other billion-dollar sponsorships and endorsements that were introduced in this first time, um, and which has really popularized in what we now know as the modern day NASCAR. So, with this is my conclusion. Here are my references. So my questions would be, who has the most popular driver awards for NASCAR? That'd be Bill Elliott. He won it 16 times. In second place, it would be Dale Earnhardt Jr., who won it 15 times. Bill Elliott also holds the fastest speed ever recorded, going 212.8 miles per hour. Um, no one has ever come close to that because of the new speed restrictions and the air restrictors for safety reasons. So, without any more, I would like to thank you for listening to my presentation.